Hello. It's been quite a bit since I've made a video. I've been really busy with school as usual and with other real life issues. Um, Today, however, I've decided to work on a small SDL tutorial that covers inputs. Um, I recently kind of just started playing around with programming again, and I started playing around with SDL2 to see if I can improve some of the stuff I've done in the past. And one thing I wanted to improve upon was how I handled inputs. Um, Usually, I would use a function such as SDL get keyboard state, or if you're using version 1 of SDL, it's like get key state. However, I kind of wanted to explore the event loop and try to see if I could improve both efficiency and speed of of my input stuff. And I discovered that it works very well. I'm quite impressed with how fast the event loop is. It takes a little bit less memory than using those methods because in the background I was doing some extra things to the way I was handling events, which added a lot more memory strain. Now, using the event loop, it allowed me to simplify many things and do it as at a kind of a little bit more lower level. So let's get started. The first thing we should probably do before I show you what this example does is create a function called event loop that will house the SDL event loop. And let's do it this way. Let's add static, which is a good practice to get into. And let's put this below the main method or function. I do too much object-oriented programming. I did a lot of Java recently. Oh well. Now we need the SDL event, which is the highest level, highest structure for events, and we're going to do a while loop. SDL pull event e, and let's use a switch statement and get the types. Case SDL quit. G running equals false, and we're going to break it. And case SDL key down, and case SDL key up. And I'm just going to break it for now. Here's the just a basic event loop. For today, we're just going to cover keyboard because it's pretty simple. The next video where I'm going to cover the mouse because it's a little bit more complicated device, and after that maybe the gamepad. Alright, for now let's put this in here, loop at the top, and let's just build our code example. There we go, and let's play it. Basically the code example here is just going to be a simple white square, and what we're going to do with it is use the event loop to move the square around the screen. It's something very simple. Just to keep just keep our focus on how to do inputs with the event loop. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that I kind of want to do is first comment this event loop is to create a method that will create a function that will handle the input, the keyboard input handling. So let's call these event handlers for now. And the first one we're going to make is on keyboard event, and I want to pass it a constant SDL keyboard event, which is the main structure that has all information on how to handle a keyboard event. We're going to pass as a reference so we don't get, so if we pass it to this function, it's not going to make a copy of it. It'll just be a reference for it. And let's put E. I'll put this down here, like so. And up in the event loop, we're going to call this function on keyboard event and e.key. Okay, now we're going to handle pretty much everything that's related to the keyboard in this function, but for now we're going to add how to handle keyboard events. Now let's go back to the SDL get keyboard state function. It's a very, very useful function. It gives you back the states of the keyboard. However, per key you only get Boolean values from it, which is good. However, what if you want, for example, to do, say, just press the key once? You can't do it with that because you only have two values. It's either A, it's pressed, or B, it's released. So how do we find a solution to fix this problem? Well, we need something known as a tribal. A tribal is basically a value that contains three values. An example of that would be, let's say, a triboolean, for example. It's possible to have, for a triboolean to be either true or false, or if, I don't know, a good example would be maybe quantum computing. They're both true and false at the same time. But for this, we don't need to do that, and we don't really need to understand quantum computing, so let's make an input state in enum. And the stuff that we want to know about is it released? Which we're going to set this to 0 as a default value. Is it pressed down once? And is it pressed? That's fine and dandy. The next step, we need to have an array of all these. But before that, we need to know how many keys that we need to store. Well, SDL, if we can find the external dependency for it, has a enum called scan codes. Wrong one. Come on, go away. Let's get rid of that one. And it contains every single key that can be used with SDL. And awesomely enough, it has a max value for it. SDL can handle up to 512 keys. So we're going to use that for the size of this array. And let's make it keyboard globals. So let's make it static input state key states, and we're going to set it to SDL num scan codes. There we go. Can't remember anything right now. Okay, that's awesome. So now that we have this, we're going to need some functions to handle the keyboard. So let's make some keyboard functions. For one, we need void. I forgot to put static on this. I'll fix the bottom one in a minute. Static void key hit, which is going to be for returns true if key state code is equal, let's put the word equal to is once. The one after this is going to return true if key state code is equal to is once or two is pressed, and that should make up these two methods. So we're going to pass it SDL scan code, which is that enum I showed you before. You could possibly pass an integer, but this gives a lot better documentation, period, because you want to specifically pass it a scan code. And the next function is going to be key press, and it's going to be pass a scan code. And I did something derpy. I need to pass these, have these return boolean. Now we have a small little issue though with this, which is going to be in here, because we need to set is once first before we do a is pressed. So we need a utility function that will be called before the event loop executes to make sure that if there is once, it will change to is pressed, because how events are handled, the only way to trigger another event is if a state change happens. That's the only way. So we have to kind of force a little change. So we'll make a simple utility functions section here, and we're gonna add in check for is once, change to is pressed. Hopefully that's not too confusing. There we go. Alright, let's take our functions down here, copy them, and move them down here so we can make an implementation. And let me fix this real fast. That's static. Okay, so let's get these up and running. And I forgot one more function. We need to make sure everything initializes so that it will be release. So initialize keyboard, and we're going to do void init keyboard. I'm not typing very well today. Let's put this down here. Alrighty. Okay. Now let's worry about the on key event in a minute. Let's get these functions implemented. So the first thing we want from this one is to sorry, I've been sick. Init key states to is released, so that we make sure we don't have any junk values. So we need to use a for loop. Int I equals 0, I is less than SDL num of scan codes, if I remember correctly. And this is going to go through and set key states array 2 is released. Okay, now let's move down here. What we're going to return is up there, so if return key states code equals is once. Let's copy this, move it to this one because we need it, and we're going to do or key states code is equal to is pressed. Alrighty. Basically, this will check to see if key state is once. This will get changed to key pressed, so this will return false. But if it's equal to is once, it will return true. This will, however, return true if either of these cases are correct. It will return false if it is released. So check is once is that utility method or function. I'm so used to object-oriented coding. What this is going to do is it's going to scan through the key state array. So let's make another for loop. Scan codes I++, and it's going to check if key states is equal to is once. So if key states I is equal to is once, key states will equal to is pressed. And this will be executed in the event loop, and it's going to be executed. Check is once beforehand. Now the reason why we want to do this is that if you call it below it, it will automatically change it to press before the frame ends, which wouldn't be fun. You won't get the benefit of only a single key hit. So that's why we're putting it beforehand, to make sure it changes. So for right now, we need to do one more thing, and it's to implement how do we actually handle key events. Well, this is a pretty simple process. For one, what we want the scan code. Then we need to check if the keyboard state is pressed or released. Then do changes to the keyboard, the key states. Okay, so how do we get the scan codes? Well, first off, we need SDL scan code, obviously. Code equals e dot keysim dot scan code. Fairly straightforward. The next one we need will be a Boolean value to make it simple, and it's going to equal to e dot state is equal to SDL pressed. If it's pressed, then it'll return true. Otherwise, it will be false. Not too bad. And the next thing we need to do is do an if b, or else we need to do changes to the key state. Well, we need another if statement here for this first one. So if key states that code is equal to is released, we want key states to equal to is once, which basically sets it up to allow us to execute the key hit method or function, and for the check is once method, we'll change it after the fact or on the next frame, so that this other method can be executed when we need it. So that's all we need to do in there. And for this else, I'm doing this to make sure we don't execute another block. So key states code equals is release no, is not equal to is released, and we're just going to simply set it back, the code back to is released. Okay, there we go. And we're pretty much complete with how complete to do keyboard inputs. Pretty simple, straightforward. I was surprised by how easy this was when I first played with it. So for now, let's see if this code works. Let's add in two if statements. If key press, and we're going to use SDL scan code, left button, which is the left arrow button. And if key hit is SDL scan code, right button. And what we're going to do is do a simple cout of hello from left arrow button. This one should pretty much continuously print out. And let's just copy and paste this one, make it simple. From right arrow, we're going to say hello from right arrow button. And what this one should do is just simply print out once. So let's build our project and see. Oh, good, it built. That's always good to see. And let's press the left arrow button. Yep, it works. Awesome. And the right one. Good, it's just doing one press at a time. Nifty. Okay, so let's really test this to make sure it works, and try to move our little friend the square here around the screen. So let's comment these out, and let's make a couple other if statements. So if key press SDL scan code left, else if key press SDL scan code is right. To let you know, this OpenGL code I have for rendering the square, I have a translation function down here that uses a variable x and a variable y to move around the screen, and their default values set at position 32 for both the x and y. So for the left and right button, we want to move the x-axis, so we're going to subtract the x from just 1, and that will make the square box go left. X plus equal to 1, f, will make the box go right. So let's just play it safe, test it right here. And the box should move on the x-axis. Yep. Works nicely. So now let's get it working with the y-axis. So if key press, and we'll keep it, we'll make sure that it stays, I don't know the word for it, let's just say it stays within the keys that we want to. So it's going to have a key SDL up, else if key press, consistent, that's the word. I'm tired, it's 7 o'clock over here and I got done with school, so I'm tired. I'm ready to go to bed. It's been a busy week out here in OKC because of that silly ice storm. Whoops. That we had a couple weeks ago. That wasn't fun. Okay. Now this example should be done. So let's test this. Yep, still works on the X, and it works on the Y. So let's move in diagonal. Okay. So we have a full working example of doing inputs using the event loop. The event loop does a pretty good job of simplifying inputs. As you can see here, you simply need to wrap the the keyboard into a simple function, and you can do some state changes to make it do a lot more than you could do with the SDL get keyboard state or yada yada. Um, Tomorrow I'm gonna keep working with this example of doing input stuff. We're gonna focus on the mouse tomorrow. It's a little bit more complicated because it's both a button device and it's a pointer device. So, and I'm going to post the source code to this on my Dropbox so you can download it. I'm going to put that in a link down below. And I will see you all later. You all take care.